The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Montana Territory as Rebecca Winters clutched the worn advertisement in her trembling hands, realizing too late that the promise of a new life as a mail-order bride was nothing but a cruel deception. It was 1875, and the 22-year-old had just been sold for the second time in 3 months to a man whose eyes held no warmth, only calculation. Rebecca had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a seamstress who had taught her letters and numbers in the evenings after long days of work. When her mother died of consumption the previous winter, Rebecca found herself alone, with mounting debts and no prospects. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like Providence a chance to escape the grinding poverty of the city and make a new start in the West. A respectable gentleman seeking a bride. Passage paid. All she needed was a willingness to work hard and help establish a homestead. The reality had been far different. The gentleman who met her train in Chicago was a thin, weasel-faced man named Horace Blackwood who explained, as he roughly took her arm, that he was an agent who procured wives for men in the territories. He had paid for her passage, not as a prospective husband, but as merchandise. "You'll fetch a fine price," he had told her, his eyes appraising her fair skin and auburn hair. "Pretty thing like you is worth good money out west where women are scarce." Her first husband had been a silver miner in Colorado, a brute named Silas Tanner who had paid $300 for her. He had married her in a hasty ceremony performed by a drunken preacher who barely remembered the words. Silas had kept her locked in his cabin when he went to work, using her as little more than a servant and worse at night. After 2 months, when his claim failed, he had sold her again to recoup his investment. And now here she was, in the back of a wagon bound for yet another husband, a cattle rancher near the town of Broken Ridge who had paid $400 sight unseen. The agent accompanying her, a bulky man with tobacco-stained teeth named Wilkes, had made it clear that any attempt to escape would be met with severe consequences. The wagon hit a rut, jolting Rebecca from her thoughts. The Montana landscape stretched around her, beautiful and forbidding with its sweeping plains and distant mountains. In another circumstance, she might have found it breathtaking. Now it seemed only vast and empty, a prison without walls. Almost there, Wilkes grunted, spitting a stream of tobacco juice over the side of the wagon. "Rancher Haynes is expecting you by sundown. Got a spread about 10 miles outside of town." Rebecca said nothing. She had learned that silence was safer than protest. Her blue eyes stared ahead, revealing nothing of the calculations running through her mind. She would find a way out of this nightmare. She had to. As the wagon approached a bend in the trail, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder behind them. Wilkes cursed, reaching for the rifle propped beside him. "Stay down," he ordered, slowing the wagon. 3 riders appeared around the bend ahead, forcing Wilkes to pull the wagon to a stop. They were trail-worn men, dust coating their clothes, but something about their bearing suggested they weren't ordinary travelers. The leader, a tall man with broad shoulders and a weather-beaten face, rode forward. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his features, but Rebecca could see he was younger than the others, perhaps 30. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to the saddle and to giving orders. "Afternoon," he called, his voice deep and measured. "Road ahead is washed out from yesterday's storm. You'll need to take the North Fork if you're heading to Broken Ridge." Wilkes shifted nervously, obliged for the information. The man's eyes shifted to Rebecca, narrowing slightly as he took in her travel-worn appearance and the wariness in her eyes. Something in his expression changed, hardened. "Traveling with your wife?" he asked casually. "None of your business who I'm traveling with," Wilkes replied, his hand inching toward his rifle. The stranger's hand moved faster than Rebecca could follow, and suddenly a revolver was pointed at Wilkes's chest. "I asked you a question." The calm in his voice was more frightening than anger would have been. "She's spoken for," Wilkes said, sweat beading on his forehead. "Paid for and legal." I'm just delivering her to her husband. The stranger's gaze returned to Rebecca. Madam, is that true? For the first time in months, someone was asking what she wanted. Rebecca hesitated only a moment before finding her voice. No, she said clearly. I was deceived. Brought west under false pretenses and sold. Twice. The stranger's jaw tightened. He gestured with his gun. Step down from the wagon, madam. Wilkes reached for his rifle, but the second rider already had him covered. I wouldn't, he advised quietly. Rebecca gathered her skirts and climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady after hours of travel. The tall stranger dismounted, keeping his gun trained on Wilkes. What's your name? He asked her. Rebecca Winters. I'm Zachary Thornton, he replied, then nodded to his companions. That's Roy and Emmett. We're ranchers from north of here. He turned back to Wilkes. The buying and selling of human beings ended with the war, mister. We don't take kindly to it continuing in any form around these parts. It's legal, Wilkes protested. She signed a contract. Ask her. Under false pretenses, Rebecca said. I agreed to be a mail-order bride, not to be sold repeatedly to the highest bidder. Zachary's eyes darkened. Roy, check his pockets. I want to see this so-called contract. While Roy kept his gun on Wilkes, Emmett dismounted and searched the man, producing a folded document from his coat. He handed it to Zachary, who scanned it quickly. This isn't worth the paper it's written on, he said after a moment. It's not even a marriage contract, it's a bill of sale. He looked at Rebecca. Did you sign this? She shook her head. I signed a marriage agreement in Boston, but not that. Zachary folded the paper and tucked it into his vest pocket. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn this wagon around and head back wherever you came from. You're going to forget about Miss Winters and any money you think you're owed. Rancher Haynes will come looking. Let him. Zachary cut in. I'd be happy to explain to him and the sheriff how you're trafficking women across territorial lines. Wilkes glared but seemed to recognize his disadvantage. What about her? He asked, jerking his head toward Rebecca. Miss Winters will be coming with us, Zachary said. He turned to her. If that's agreeable to you, madam, we can take you to town, help you get situated, or arrange passage back east. Rebecca hesitated. She had no money, no contacts in this strange territory. Going with these men might be exchanging one danger for another. Yet something in Zachary Thornton's steady gaze made her believe he meant what he said. That would be very kind, she finally said. Zachary nodded to Roy, who kept his gun trained on Wilkes while Emmett helped Rebecca retrieve her small carpet bag from the wagon. It contained everything she owned in the world: a spare dress, a nightgown, a hairbrush, and a locket containing a tiny daguerreotype of her mother. Turn around, Zachary ordered Wilkes. And don't look back. Wilkes spat another stream of tobacco juice, this time deliberately close to Rebecca's feet. You're making a mistake, he said. Haynes won't take this lightly. That's his problem, Zachary replied evenly. Now go. With a final glare, Wilkes turned the wagon and snapped the reins, heading back the way he had come. Zachary turned to Rebecca. Can you ride, Miss Winters? A little, she admitted. It's been some time. He nodded. You can ride with me, then. We've got about 3 hours to Thornton Ranch before dark. Rebecca looked at the three men uncertainly. I'm grateful for your intervention, Mr. Thornton, but I don't want to impose. Perhaps you could just take me to the nearest town. Broken Ridge is 20 miles south, Zachary explained. Our ranch is closer, and my sister Kate is there. You'd be more comfortable with another woman present, I expect. The mention of a sister eased some of Rebecca's anxiety. She nodded her agreement. Zachary mounted his horse, a sturdy bay gelding, then reached down to help Rebecca up behind him. She settled awkwardly, unsure where to place her hands. You'll need to hold on, he said over his shoulder. It's not the smoothest trail. Hesitantly, she placed her hands at his waist, feeling the solid strength of him through his cotton shirt. As they set off at an easy trot, Rebecca felt a curious mixture of fear and hope. These men had rescued her, but she had learned the hard way that kindness often came with expectations. Still, for the moment at least, she was free from Wilkes and the dreaded rancher Haynes. The Montana landscape unfolded around them as they rode vast grasslands dotted with wildflowers, rolling hills that gave way to stands of pine and aspen. In the distance, mountains reached toward a sky of perfect blue. Despite her circumstances, Rebecca couldn't help but be moved by the wild beauty of this land. "It's breathtaking," she murmured, almost to herself. Zachary glanced back at her. "It grows on you," he said. "When I first came here after the war, I thought it was too big, too empty. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "You fought in the war?" she asked, seizing on this small opening for conversation for normalcy. "Union cavalry," he replied. "Came west in '67 with my sister after our parents died. Fever took them both within a month of each other." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly. "I lost my mother last winter. My father died when I was a child." Zachary was quiet for a moment. "It's a hard thing," he finally said. "But Kate and I made a new start here. Built something good." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling Rebecca despite her anxiety. She found herself leaning more heavily against Zachary's back, exhaustion from days of travel and constant fear catching up with her. "Rest if you need to," he said, seeming to sense her fatigue. "I won't let you fall." Something about the simple promise brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. She blinked them away, determined not to give in to weakness. She had survived this far on her wits and courage. She would continue to do so. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the landscape changed subtly. The wild grasslands gave way to more cultivated areas, fenced pastures where cattle grazed, fields of crops beginning to show green against the brown earth. Finally, they crested a rise, and Zachary reined in his horse. "Thornton Ranch," he said, gesturing ahead. Below them stretched a tidy collection of buildings nestled in a valley where a creek ran clear and swift. The main house was larger than Rebecca had expected, built of solid logs with a covered porch wrapping around two sides. A large barn stood nearby, along with a bunkhouse, corrals, and several smaller outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, curling into the evening sky. "It's lovely," Rebecca said sincerely. Something that might have been pride crossed Zachary's face. "We've worked hard to build it," he said. "Started with nothing but a broken-down cabin and 50 head of cattle." They rode down into the valley, the other two men following behind. As they approached the house, a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the setting sun. She was tall and slender, her dark hair pulled back in a practical knot at the nape of her neck. She wore a simple blue dress with an apron tied around her waist. "That's Kate," Zachary said. As they drew up to the house, Kate Thornton's expression changed from welcome to curiosity as she noticed Rebecca. "Zach, what's this?" she called, descending the porch steps. Zachary dismounted, then turned to help Rebecca down. Her legs felt weak after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground. Zachary's hand stayed at her elbow, steadying her. "Kate, this is Miss Rebecca Winters," he said. "She's had a difficult journey." "Miss Winters, my sister, Kate." Kate's sharp eyes took in Rebecca's travel-worn appearance and the way she stood slightly apart, wary and uncertain. "Welcome to Thornton Ranch, Miss Winters," she said, her tone warming. "You look like you could use a hot meal and a bath." Rebecca felt tears threatening again at this simple kindness. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't want to be a burden." "Nonsense," Kate said briskly. "We've plenty of room. Zach, see to the horses. I'll get Miss Winters settled." With a nod, Zachary headed toward the barn with Roy and Emmett, leading the horses. Kate took Rebecca's arm gently. "Come inside," she said. Whatever trouble you're in, you're safe here. Rebecca followed her into the house, which was as comfortable inside as it had appeared from the outside. The main room was spacious, with polished wooden floors covered by woven rugs. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, a cooking fire crackling cheerfully. The furniture was simple but well made, a long table with benches, several chairs arranged near the fireplace, shelves lined with books and household items. "It's beautiful," Rebecca said, taking in the homey touches that spoke of care and permanence. Curtains at the windows, a vase of wildflowers on the table, a patchwork quilt draped over one of the chairs. "Thank you," Kate said, leading her toward a hallway. "It's taken years to make it feel like home. The bedroom at the end is yours for as long as you need it. There's a washroom next door. I'll heat water for a bath while you get settled." The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small table beside the bed. A window looked out over the creek and the hills beyond. "I'll bring you fresh towels and a nightgown," Kate said. "Rest a bit. Dinner won't be for another hour." When Kate had gone, Rebecca sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. This morning, she had awakened in a roadside inn, dreading her delivery to Rancher Haynes. Now she was in a comfortable home, treated with kindness by strangers who asked nothing in return. She knew better than to trust too quickly. Life had taught her harsh lessons about the true nature of people's generosity. Yet something about the Thorntons felt different. There was a straightforwardness to them, an absence of the calculating looks she had grown accustomed to from men like Blackwood, Tanner, and Wilkes. Rebecca opened her carpet bag and took out her mother's locket, the one possession she had refused to part with despite the hardships of recent months. She opened it, gazing at the tiny image of her mother's face so like her own, with the same determined chin and thoughtful eyes. "I'm trying, Mother," she whispered. "I'm trying to find my way." Later, freshly bathed and dressed in a borrowed nightgown with her hair still damp, Rebecca sat at the Thorntons' table, a plate of hot food before her. The meal was simple but abundant: roast beef, potatoes, carrots from the garden, and fresh bread that Kate had baked that morning. Zachary, cleaned up from the trail, sat across from her. He had been quiet since their return, letting Kate take charge of their guest. Now, as Rebecca hesitantly began to eat, he studied her with those steady gray eyes. "Miss Winters," he said finally, I hope you don't mind my asking, but I'd like to understand your situation better. How did you come to be in Wilkes's custody?" Rebecca set down her fork, her appetite suddenly diminished. Kate shot her brother a look of reproach. "Zach, can it wait until morning? Miss Winters is exhausted." "It's all right," Rebecca said quietly. "You've shown me great kindness. You deserve to know who you've brought into your home." She told them her story: her mother's death, the advertisement that had seemed like salvation, the betrayal in Chicago, and the nightmare that followed. She spoke plainly, without embellishment, though she avoided the details of her time with Silas Tanner. When she finished, the kitchen was silent except for the crackle of the fire. Kate's eyes shone with tears, while Zachary's face had hardened into grim lines. "These men should be hanged," he said finally, his voice low and controlled, but vibrating with anger. "Trading in human lives as if slavery never ended. It's more common than you might think," Kate said sadly. "I've heard stories from town. Women brought west under false pretenses, trapped in impossible situations far from home. And this Rancher Haynes," Zachary continued. "He knows you're coming?" Rebecca nodded. "Wilkes was to deliver me today." Zachary exchanged a look with his sister. "Haynes has a reputation," he said carefully. "Not a good one. His ranch borders our northern pastures. He's been trying to expand, pushing boundaries, claiming water rights that don't belong to him." "He's a bully," Kate added bluntly. "And worse, from what I've heard whispered in town." Rebecca felt cold despite the warm kitchen. "He'll be angry when Wilkes returns without me. Without his money. Let him be angry, Zachary said firmly. You're under my protection now. The words were spoken without flourish, a simple statement of fact rather than gallantry. Yet they affected Rebecca more deeply than any flowery declaration could have. Thank you, she said quietly. But I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Perhaps it would be best if I continued on to the next town or took a stage back east. With what money? Kate asked practically. Besides, Haynes would likely intercept you. No, you're safer here until we figure out a more permanent solution. Rebecca looked down at her plate, overwhelmed by their kindness, but uncertain of her path forward. I can work, she offered. I'm a good seamstress. I can cook and clean. I don't expect charity. We could use the help, Kate acknowledged. I'm the only woman on the ranch, and there's always more work than hands to do it. Then it's settled, Zachary said, rising from the table. Miss Winters stays with us for now. I'll ride into Broken Ridge tomorrow, speak with Sheriff Miller about what's happened. As he headed for the door, Rebecca called after him. Mr. Thornton? He turned back. Thank you, she said simply, for stopping on the road today. Something in his expression softened. Get some rest, Miss Winters. You're safe here. After he had gone, Kate began clearing the table. Rebecca rose to help, but Kate waved her back to her seat. Not tonight, she said kindly. You're dead on your feet. Tomorrow you can help all you want. Rebecca sank back down, too exhausted to argue. Your brother, she said hesitantly. He seems like a good man. Kate smiled. The best I know. Stubborn as a mule sometimes, and too serious for his own good, but a good man through and through. The war changed him, he came back quieter, more careful. But his sense of right and wrong never wavered. You're fortunate to have each other, Rebecca said softly. Kate's expression gentled. We are. And now, for as long as you need it, you have us too. That night, lying in a clean bed for the first time in months, Rebecca tried to make sense of the day's events. She had been taught from childhood to be wary of unexpected kindness, to look for the hidden cost. Yet try as she might, she could find no ulterior motive in the Thorntons' actions. As sleep finally claimed her, her last thoughts were of Zachary Thornton's steady gaze and his simple promise, I won't let you fall. Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the unfamiliar sound of birdsong. For a moment, she was disoriented, expecting the cramped confines of a wagon or the sparse furnishings of Silas Tanner's cabin. The comfortable bed and cheerful quilt reminded her where she was and how much had changed in a single day. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which Kate had washed and pressed overnight. They were shabby compared to the simple but well-made dress Kate had worn, but they were clean and familiar. Rebecca plaited her auburn hair into a neat braid, pinched her cheeks for color, and ventured out into the main part of the house. The kitchen was empty, but a covered plate sat warming by the stove with a note propped against it. Breakfast. Eat when you wake. Kay. Rebecca uncovered the plate to find biscuits, bacon, and eggs. She ate hungrily, realizing it had been a long time since food had tasted this good. When she had finished, she washed her dishes carefully and set them to dry, then looked around for some useful task. A basket of mending sat near one of the chairs by the fireplace. Rebecca settled there and began to work, grateful to have something productive to do with her hands. The familiar rhythm of needle and thread was soothing, reminding her of evenings spent working alongside her mother. She had been at it for perhaps an hour when the door opened and Kate entered, carrying a pail of milk. Oh, you're up, she said with a smile. And you found breakfast. Good. Thank you, Rebecca said, setting aside the shirt she had been mending. I hope you don't mind I started on your mending. Kate crossed to look at her work, nodding approvingly at the neat, even stitches. Mind? I'm delighted. I can sew well enough when I must, but I don't have the patience for fine work. It's the least I can do, Rebecca said. "Where is Mr. Thornton this morning?" "Zach rode to town at first light," Kate replied, setting the milk pail on the counter. "He wanted to speak with the sheriff about your situation and send some telegrams." She glanced at Rebecca. "Do you have family back east who might be concerned about you?" Rebecca shook her head. "No one. My mother was my only family." Kate's expression softened with sympathy. "Well, you're welcome here for as long as you like. Truly." "You're very kind," Rebecca said. "But I can't impose indefinitely. I need to find a way to support myself." "And you will," Kate assured her. "But there's no rush. Take some time to recover first." She gestured toward the door. "Would you like a tour of the ranch? It's a beautiful morning." Rebecca nodded eagerly, setting aside her mending. The prospect of fresh air and open space after so many days of confinement was irresistible. Outside, the day was indeed beautiful. The sky stretched endlessly blue above the rolling hills, dotted with the white puffs of clouds. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine from the distant forests and the sweet perfume of wildflowers that dotted the meadows. Kate showed her around the ranch buildings, the barn where milk cows and riding horses were kept, the chicken coop, the smokehouse, the kitchen garden that provided vegetables for the table. Beyond these lay the corrals where cowboys were working with young horses, and further still, the pastures where cattle grazed. "It's impressive," Rebecca said sincerely. "You and your brother have built something wonderful here." "It wasn't easy," Kate admitted. "The first winter nearly broke us. But Zach never gave up, and I couldn't let him down." She smiled at a memory. "We ate a lot of rabbit stew that winter." As they walked back toward the house, Rebecca noticed a rider approaching from the direction of town. Even at a distance, she recognized Zachary's straight-backed posture and the distinctive gait of his bay gelding. Kate shaded her eyes, watching her brother's approach. "He's back earlier than I expected," she noted. "I hope that's a good sign." They waited by the porch as Zachary rode up. His expression was grave as he dismounted, and Rebecca felt a flutter of anxiety. "What happened?" Kate asked without preamble. "Sheriff wasn't in town," Zachary replied, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "Deputy says he's out at the Carson place. Won't be back till tomorrow." He glanced at Rebecca. "I sent telegrams to the territorial marshal's office and to a lawyer I know in Helena. Explained the situation, asked for guidance on legal options." "And Haynes?" Kate asked quietly. Zachary's jaw tightened. His foreman and two hands were in town, asking questions. "They know Miss Winters never arrived." Rebecca felt cold despite the warm sunshine. "They'll come here," she said. "Wilkes knows who you are." "Let them come," Zachary said firmly. "This is our land. I've alerted the hands to keep watch. No one approaches without us knowing." Kate touched her brother's arm. "You look tired, Zach. Come inside. I'll fix you something to eat." As they entered the house, Rebecca hung back slightly, her mind racing. She had brought danger to these good people's doorstep. Perhaps it would be better if she left, made her way to another town, another territory entirely. As if reading her thoughts, Zachary turned to her. "Don't even think about running, Miss Winters. That would only make things more dangerous for you." Rebecca flushed, surprised at how easily he had discerned her intentions. "I don't want to cause trouble for you and your sister." "The trouble isn't of your making," he said firmly. "It's Haynes and men like him who need to answer for their actions." Over a simple lunch of cold beef and bread, Zachary explained what he had learned in town. "Haynes has been buying mail-order brides for years," he said grimly. "At least 3 that I know of. None of them are still at his ranch. The last one disappeared 6 months ago. He claimed she ran off with a traveling salesman." Rebecca shivered. "What happened to the others?" Zachary exchanged a look with his sister. "No one knows for certain. One supposedly died of fever. Another was said to have returned east." "But you don't believe that," Rebecca said softly. No, Zachary admitted. I don't. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Rebecca pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. What options do I have? She asked directly. Legally, I mean. Limited ones, Zachary replied honestly. The law in the territories is still developing when it comes to these matters. The lawyer I telegraphed might have better answers. But without family to return to, or means to support yourself. I could find work, Rebecca said, lifting her chin. I'm skilled with a needle. I could be a seamstress, or work in a shop. In Broken Ridge? Kate asked gently. It's a small town, Rebecca. Haynes has influence there. You wouldn't be safe. Then somewhere else, Rebecca insisted. Helena, perhaps. Or further west. That might be a solution eventually, Zachary agreed. But for now, the safest place for you is here, where we can protect you. Rebecca looked between the siblings, overwhelmed by their willingness to shield her. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. You don't know me. You owe me nothing. We know enough, Kate said simply. Zachary's gray eyes held Rebecca's. Some things are just right or wrong, Miss Winters. What was happening to you is wrong. What would happen if Haynes got his hands on you would be worse. Call me Rebecca, she said suddenly. Please. After everything, Miss Winters seems too formal. Kate smiled warmly. Rebecca it is then. Zachary nodded, a slight smile softening his features. Rebecca. The way he said her name, with a quiet respect that acknowledged her as a person worthy of protection rather than property to be bought and sold, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, not wanting to seem weak or overly emotional. Now, Kate said briskly, rising to clear the plates. We have work to do. The ranch doesn't run itself, and I for one could use an extra pair of hands with the washing. Rebecca welcomed the distraction of physical labor. She spent the afternoon helping Kate with the laundry, learning the layout of the house, and assisting with dinner preparations. The work was honest and straightforward, nothing like the degrading tasks Silas Tanner had set for her. As dusk approached, she stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The beauty of it caught in her throat this wild, vast land that had been the setting for her greatest suffering and, perhaps, her salvation. She heard the door open behind her and turned to find Zachary approaching. He had shed his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing strong forearms tanned by the sun. Quite a sight, isn't it? He asked, nodding toward the sunset. It's magnificent, Rebecca replied. I've never seen colors like that in Boston. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the colors deepened and the first stars began to appear in the darkening eastern sky. Kate tells me you're quite the seamstress, Zachary said finally. Rebecca nodded. My mother taught me. It was how we supported ourselves after my father died. There's a need for such skills in these parts, he said. Not many women with training in fine needlework. She glanced at him, wondering where he was leading. I've been thinking about that, she admitted. If I could establish myself somewhere safe, I could make a living. Zachary turned to face her directly. Rebecca, there's something I need to discuss with you. A possible solution to your situation. Her heart quickened, though whether with hope or apprehension she couldn't say. Yes. He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, running a hand through his hair. It's not an ideal proposal, and I want you to know you're free to refuse. What is it? She asked, curious now. Marriage, he said simply. To me. Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon? A marriage of convenience, he clarified quickly. In name only. As my wife, you would have the protection of my name and my ranch. Haynes couldn't touch you. And in time, when the danger has passed, we could seek an annulment if you wish to move on. Rebecca was speechless. Of all the solutions she had considered, this had never occurred to her. You would do that, she finally managed. For a stranger? You're not exactly a stranger anymore, he said with a slight smile. And yes, I would. It's the surest way to protect you. But what about you? She asked. Surely you had other plans for your future. A real marriage, children. Something flickered in his eyes. My life is here, on this ranch. It's enough. He paused. Think about it. There's no rush to decide. Rebecca's mind was whirling. A marriage of convenience to a man she barely knew, yet a man who had already shown more decency and honor than any she had encountered since leaving Boston. And if I decline? She asked. Then we find another solution, he said simply. This changes nothing about my commitment to help you. Before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Zachary tensed, moving slightly in front of Rebecca as he peered into the gathering dusk. A rider approached the house at a canter. As he drew closer, Rebecca could see it was one of the ranch hands, a young man named Timothy, whom she had met briefly during the day. Mr. Thornton, he called, reining in his horse. Riders coming. 5 of them from the north. Zachary's expression hardened. Haynes, he said grimly. Sooner than I expected. He turned to Rebecca. Go inside. Tell Kate what's happening. Rebecca hesitated. What are you going to do? Talk to them, Zachary replied. Calmly and reasonably, if possible. And if that's not possible? His hand moved unconsciously to the revolver at his hip. Then we'll handle it another way. Go on now. Rebecca hurried inside to find Kate already alert to the situation, a shotgun in her hands. I heard, she said tersely. Stay away from the windows. Your brother's out there, Rebecca protested. Alone. Not for long, Kate replied. Roy and Emmett are coming from the bunkhouse. Zach can handle himself. Rebecca paced anxiously as they waited. Through the window, she could see Zachary standing on the porch, silhouetted against the light from the house. Timothy had dismounted and stood beside him, hand resting on his holstered gun. Minutes later, 5 riders appeared in the yard. Even in the dim light, Rebecca could make out the imposing figure of the man who led them, tall and broad-shouldered, with a full beard and an air of arrogant authority. This, she guessed, was Rancher Haynes. Though she couldn't hear the words, she could see Zachary step forward to meet them, his posture relaxed but alert. The conversation appeared tense, but controlled. Kate joined her at the window, peering out carefully. Roy and Emmett are positioned by the barn, she murmured. And Jenkins is around the side of the house with a rifle. Rebecca glanced at her in surprise. Kate smiled grimly. We've had trouble with Haynes before. Zach wouldn't face him unprepared. Outside, the conversation continued. Haynes gesticulated forcefully, his voice raised enough that occasional words reached them through the closed windows, paid for, and rightfully mine. Zachary's responses were too low to hear, but his stance remained firm and unyielding. Finally, Haynes spat on the ground and turned his horse, saying something that made his men laugh harshly. They rode away at a deliberate pace, not hurried, but clearly retreating for now. Rebecca released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They're leaving. For now, Kate said grimly. But they'll be back. The door opened, and Zachary entered, his expression thunderous. Arrogant bastard, he muttered, then glanced up at Rebecca. Pardon my language. What did he say? Kate asked. Zachary removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Rebecca was beginning to recognize as a sign of agitation. He claims he paid good money for Rebecca and expects delivery. Says he has a contract. The same fraudulent paper Wilkes had? Rebecca asked. Zachary nodded. I told him the contract was worthless and that you were under my protection. He didn't take it well. His exact words? Kate prompted, knowing her brother too well. Zachary's jaw tightened. He said he always gets what he pays for, one way or another. Said I'd regret interfering. Rebecca sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. "This is my fault. I've brought this danger to your home." "No," Zachary said firmly, crossing to her. "Haynes and I have been at odds for years. This is just his latest attempt to intimidate me." He knelt beside her chair, his gray eyes intent on hers. "Rebecca, I need an answer to what we discussed earlier. Not because I'm pressuring you, but because it might change how we handle this situation." Kate looked between them, puzzled. "What did you discuss?" Zachary kept his eyes on Rebecca. "I proposed a marriage of convenience. For protection." Kate's eyebrows rose, but she said nothing, watching her brother with a thoughtful expression. Rebecca took a deep breath. The decision seemed both monumental and, strangely, already made. Something about Zachary Thornton, his quiet strength, his unwavering sense of right and wrong made her trust him when she had sworn never to trust a man again. "Yes," she said softly. "I accept your proposal." Relief crossed his face, followed by something more complex that she couldn't quite read. "You're sure?" Rebecca nodded. "As you said, it's the most practical solution."
And
She hesitated, then continued honestly, "And I trust you, Mr. Thornton. I believe you're a man of your word." "Zachary," he corrected gently, "if we're to be married, even in name only, you should use my given name." "Zachary," she repeated, the name feeling strangely intimate on her tongue. Kate cleared her throat. "Well, this is unexpected, but I can't say I disapprove. The question is, how soon can it be arranged? And will it be recognized as legal, given Rebecca's previous situation?" "I sent a telegram to Judge Wilson and Helena," Zachary replied, rising to his feet. "Explain the circumstances," asked about the legality. His reply came just before I returned. He said since the previous marriage was clearly fraudulent and conducted under duress, it has no legal standing. We're free to proceed. "How soon?" Rebecca asked, practical concerns surfacing through her emotional turmoil. "Tomorrow, if possible," Zachary said. "The Reverend in Broken Ridge can perform the ceremony. I'll ride in first thing in the morning to arrange it." The reality of what she had agreed to suddenly hit Rebecca with full force. Tomorrow she would marry a man she had known for barely 2 days, a man who had offered her his name and protection while asking nothing in return. "So quickly," she murmured. Zachary's expression softened. "It's not how either of us imagined marriage would come to us, I expect. But circumstances being what they are." "No, you're right," Rebecca said, gathering her composure. "The sooner the better. For safety's sake." "For safety's sake," he echoed, though something in his tone suggested there might be more to it than that. Kate, ever practical, took charge of the situation. "Well, if there's to be a wedding tomorrow, we have preparations to make. Rebecca can't be married in that travel-worn dress." Rebecca glanced down at her shabby attire. "I have nothing else." "I have a blue dress that should fit you with some quick alterations," Kate said thoughtfully. "It was our mother's. I've kept it all these years, but never had occasion to wear it." "Oh, Kate, I couldn't." "Yes, you could," Kate interrupted firmly. "Mother would have wanted it used for such a purpose. She always did have a romantic heart." Zachary smiled at his sister, a rare full smile that transformed his serious face. "That she did. Always reading those novels with ladies swooning into gentlemen's arms."
Kate laughed.
"And dreaming of the grand wedding she would arrange for each of us." Her expression sobered slightly. She would have understood, though, the practicalities of life out here. The mention of parents and family traditions brought a pang to Rebecca's heart. "My mother always said I would wear her wedding gown," she said softly. "But it was sold along with most of our belongings after she died, to pay the debts."
Kate squeezed her hand.
"Then you'll start a new tradition. The blue dress can be something borrowed and something blue in one." Rebecca felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "Thank you," she said simply. Zachary cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable with the emotional turn of the conversation. "I should check on the men. Make sure they're alert tonight. Haynes isn't likely to try anything before morning, but I won't take chances." After he had gone, Kate turned to Rebecca with a searching look. "Are you truly comfortable with this arrangement?" "My brother is a good man, but marriage is a serious step, even one entered into for protection." Rebecca considered the question honestly. 2 days ago, I was being transported like cattle to a man who viewed me as property. Today, I'm being offered a chance at safety and dignity by a man who has shown me nothing but respect. Yes, I'm comfortable with it. Kate nodded, apparently satisfied.
Good.
Because while Zach calls it a marriage of convenience, I suspect his feelings may run deeper than he's acknowledging, even to himself. Rebecca looked at her in surprise. "We barely know each other. Sometimes that doesn't matter," Kate said simply. "I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Rebecca didn't know how to respond to that. The idea that Zachary might have genuine feelings for her seemed impossible, and yet she couldn't deny that something had sparked between them from that first moment on the trail when he had looked into her eyes and asked what she wanted. "Come," Kate said, rising from her chair. "Let's see about that dress. Tomorrow, we'll be here before we know it." That night, alone in the guest room that would soon be hers no longer, Rebecca lay awake, her mind too full for sleep. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Zachary Thornton, a name and identity she had never imagined for herself. She thought of her mother, of the dreams they had shared for her future. This was not the marriage either of them had envisioned. And yet, there was something about Zachary that her mother would have approved of: his steadiness, his sense of honor, his quiet strength. Outside her window, an owl called into the night. Rebecca listened to its mournful cry and wondered what the future held. Not for the first time, she offered a silent prayer of thanks for the chance meeting on the trail that had changed the course of her life. Morning came all too soon, bringing with it a flurry of activity. Kate was up at dawn, heating water for baths, pressing the blue dress she had promised, and organizing a simple wedding breakfast. Nothing elaborate, she assured Rebecca as they worked together in the kitchen, but a few special touches to make the day memorable. Rebecca appreciated the effort, though her stomach was too knotted with nerves to think much about food. The reality of what she was about to do had fully settled in overnight, bringing with it equal measures of anxiety and resolve. Zachary had ridden to town at first light to arrange for the ceremony, leaving Roy and several other hands to guard the ranch. Kate had sent Timothy to invite a few neighbors' trusted friends who could serve as witnesses and provide a semblance of festivity to the hastily arranged wedding. By mid-morning, Rebecca was bathed and dressed in Kate's blue gown. It was a simple design but made of fine material, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. With a few quick alterations, Kate had made it fit as if it had been made for Rebecca. "You look beautiful," Kate said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "That color brings out your eyes." Rebecca glanced at her reflection in the small mirror Kate had brought to her room. The woman who looked back at her seemed both familiar and strange, her own features, but softened somehow, less haunted than they had been only days before. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for everything." Kate squeezed her hand. "That's what family does." The word family caught in Rebecca's heart. Was that what she was becoming part of today? It seemed too much to hope for, and yet a commotion outside interrupted her thoughts. Horses arriving, men's voices calling greetings. Rebecca moved to the window to see Zachary dismounting from his bay gelding, alongside another man she presumed to be the Reverend, a tall, thin figure in a black coat carrying a Bible. "They're here," she said, her voice sounding strained even to her own ears. "Deep breaths," Kate advised with a smile. "It's just a ceremony. The words are ancient, but they're only words." But they weren't only words, Rebecca thought. They were promises, commitments even in a marriage of convenience. She would be vowing to honor and obey a man she had known less than 3 days. And yet, Those 3 days had shown her more of Zachary Thornton's character than months might reveal of another man's. He was steadfast, honorable, and kind. Whatever else this marriage might or might not become, she knew he would keep his word and protect her. Kate left to greet the arrivals, and Rebecca took a final moment alone to collect herself. She touched her mother's locket, which Kate had polished to a high shine and fastened around her neck as something old. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, Mother," she whispered. A soft knock at the door announced Kate's return. "They're ready," she said gently. "Are you?" Rebecca took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." The main room of the house had been transformed in small but meaningful ways. Fresh wildflowers adorned the table and mantel. The furniture had been rearranged to create a space where the ceremony could take place before the stone fireplace, which crackled with a cheerful fire despite the warm day. A small gathering of people turned as Rebecca entered the reverend, a few ranch hands including Roy and Emmett, and 3 women Rebecca guessed were neighbors' wives. And Zachary, standing by the fireplace, looking more formal than she had yet seen him in a clean dark coat, his hair neatly combed. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strangeness of their situation, perhaps, but also a reaffirmation of the choice they had made. Zachary's expression was serious but warm, and he gave her a slight nod that somehow steadied her nerves. Kate led her forward to stand beside Zachary. The Reverend, a kindly-looking man with gray at his temples, smiled at them both. "Friends," he began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief and traditional. Rebecca heard herself responding at the appropriate moments, her voice clearer and more confident than she had expected. When it came time for the ring, Zachary produced a simple gold band that had been his mother's, another family treasure that Kate had insisted they use. As he slipped it onto her finger, his hand steady and warm around hers, Rebecca felt a curious sense of rightness that had nothing to do with practicality or safety. This man, who had risked himself to save her from a terrible fate, was now binding his life to hers. The enormity of it caught in her throat. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend concluded. He smiled at Zachary. "You may kiss your bride." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Zachary's face. This, apparently, was a detail they had neglected to discuss. Rebecca felt a blush rising in her cheeks as the small gathering watched expectantly. Then Zachary leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and brief, but unmistakably real. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through Rebecca, and when he drew back, she saw surprise and something more complex in his gray eyes. "Mrs. Thornton," he said softly, for her ears alone. The name, so new and strange, nonetheless sent a shiver of recognition through her. For better or worse, she was Rebecca Thornton now. Kate was the first to step forward and embrace them both, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Welcome to the family," she whispered to Rebecca. "Officially." The small gathering moved to the table where Kate had prepared a modest feast: roast chicken, fresh bread, early vegetables from the garden, and a special cake made with precious sugar saved for important occasions. As they ate and the neighbors offered congratulations and good wishes, Rebecca observed her new husband. Zachary seemed more relaxed than she had yet seen him, smiling more readily, accepting the good-natured teasing of his ranch hands with easy grace. Occasionally his eyes would find hers across the table, and that strange, warm connection would pass between them again. After the meal, while the guests were enjoying coffee and cake, Timothy burst into the house, his young face flushed with exertion. "Mr. Thornton," he called, then stopped awkwardly as he realized he was interrupting the celebration. "Sir, I'm sorry, but there's riders coming. Haynes and at least 8 men with him." The easy atmosphere evaporated instantly. Zachary rose from his chair, his expression hardening into the alert watchfulness Rebecca had first seen on the trail. Ladies, he said calmly, please remain inside. Roy, Emmett, with me. Jenkins, get the rifles from the bunkhouse. Rebecca stood as well. Zachary, what are you going to do? He turned to her, and for a brief moment, his professional mask slipped, revealing concern and something that might have been tenderness. Stay inside, Rebecca. Please. Before she could protest, he was gone, striding purposefully toward the door with Roy and Emmett close behind. The Reverend, looking alarmed, hurried after them. Perhaps I can help mediate, he said. Violence on a wedding day would be a terrible thing. Kate touched Rebecca's arm. Come to the window. We can see what's happening. The women gathered at the front windows, watching as Zachary, his men, and the Reverend formed a line in front of the house. Minutes later, Haynes and his riders appeared, approaching at a deliberate pace that somehow seemed more menacing than a gallop would have been. Through the glass, Rebecca could hear the voices faintly Haynes's deep bellow, Zachary's controlled responses, the Reverend's attempts at peacekeeping. The tension was visible even at a distance, in the way the men stood, in the hands that hovered near weapons. What are they saying? One of the neighbor women asked anxiously. I can't make it out, Kate replied, her face tight with worry. Rebecca strained to hear, catching fragments, legal contract from Haynes, lawfully married from the Reverend, something about territorial law from Zachary. Outside, Haynes dismounted, approaching closer to where Zachary stood. The two men were of similar height and build, creating a striking tableau as they faced each other, barely an arm's length apart. Whatever Haynes said next made Zachary's posture stiffen. His hand moved to his revolver, though he didn't draw it. Haynes laughed, a sound that carried even through the closed windows, harsh and contemptuous. This isn't good, Kate murmured. Haynes doesn't back down easily. The Reverend stepped between the two men, Bible in hand, speaking earnestly to Haynes. For a tense moment, it seemed his words might have an effect. Then Haynes roughly pushed him aside. That was the catalyst. In an instant, both groups of men had drawn weapons, a standoff that balanced on a knife's edge of potential violence. Rebecca couldn't bear it. Without stopping to think, she moved to the door. Rebecca, no. Kate called after her, but Rebecca was already stepping onto the porch. Stop, she called clearly, her voice carrying across the yard. There's no need for bloodshed. All eyes turned to her. Zachary's alarmed, Haynes's calculating, the others varying degrees of surprised and confused. Rebecca, go back inside, Zachary said tersely, not taking his eyes off Haynes. No, she replied, moving to stand beside him. This dispute is about me. I should have a say in resolving it. Haynes looked her up and down, his expression a mixture of appreciation and disdain that made Rebecca's skin crawl. So this is the merchandise I paid for, he said. Pretty enough, I'll grant you that. And spirited too, by the looks of it. I am not merchandise, Mr. Haynes, Rebecca said firmly, lifting her chin. I am a free woman and, as of this morning, the lawfully wedded wife of Zachary Thornton. Haynes spat on the ground. Convenient timing, he sneered. But a piece of paper and some words don't change the fact that I paid $400 for you. You paid for a fraudulent contract, Zachary said evenly. One that has no legal standing. The lady was coerced, the Reverend added, regaining his courage. Any agreement made under such circumstances is null and void in the eyes of both law and God. Haynes looked from one face to another, clearly gauging his options. His men outnumbered Zachary's, but the Reverend's presence complicated matters. Violence against a man of the cloth would not be easily overlooked, even in the loosely governed territories. $400 is a lot of money, he said finally. I don't take kindly to losing investments. Your dispute is with Wilkes, not with us, Zachary replied. He's the one who took your money under false pretenses. Haynes's eyes narrowed. And where is Wilkes now? Last we saw, headed back the way he came, Zachary said. Probably halfway to Denver by now. A tense silence followed as Haynes considered this. Rebecca held her breath, acutely aware of Zachary beside her, of the men with hands on weapons, of how quickly this standoff could turn deadly. Finally, Haynes laughed again, but the sound was different this time, resigned rather than mocking. "Well played, Thornton," he said. "You got yourself a wife and cheated me out of a tidy sum in one move." "This isn't about money," Zachary said quietly. "It's about doing what's right." Haynes shook his head, as if such a concept was beyond his understanding. "We still have unfinished business, you and I. The water rights on the north pasture. Another day," Zachary cut in. "Not on my wedding day." Something like respect flickered in Haynes's eyes. He nodded once, sharply. "Another day, then." He turned to Rebecca. "Madam, congratulations on your marriage. I trust it will be more satisfactory than what awaited you at my ranch." The thinly veiled threat was not lost on anyone present. Zachary's hand tightened on his revolver, but Rebecca laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Thank you for your good wishes, Mr. Haynes," she said with deliberate politeness. "I'm quite certain it will be." Haynes mounted his horse, signaling his men to do the same. "Thornton," he said as a parting shot, "you've made an enemy today." "I've made a wife," Zachary replied steadily. "That seems the better bargain." With a final hard stare, Haynes wheeled his horse and rode away, his men following behind. No one moved or spoke until the riders had disappeared over the rise. Only then did Zachary turn to Rebecca, his expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. "That was reckless," he said quietly. "It worked," she pointed out. The Reverend approached, looking shaken but impressed. "Mrs. Thornton, that was quite courageous. Ill-advised, perhaps, but courageous." Mrs. Thornton. The name still felt strange, but Rebecca found she liked the sound of it. Kate emerged from the house, followed by the other women. "Is it over?" she asked anxiously. "For now," Zachary replied, "though I doubt we've seen the last of Haynes." The tension of the confrontation had cast a pall over the wedding celebration. The neighbors soon made their excuses and departed, the Reverend accepting an escort from Roy and Emmett back to town. By late afternoon, the house was quiet again, with only the three of them, Zachary, Kate, and Rebecca, left to contemplate the day's events. "Some wedding day," Kate remarked with forced lightness as she cleared the last of the dishes. "Not exactly what I imagined," Rebecca admitted. Zachary, who had been unusually quiet since the confrontation, looked up at that. "And what did you imagine?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. Rebecca considered the question. "I'm not sure I ever thought much about the day itself," she said honestly. "More about what would come after a partnership, a shared life." She smiled slightly. "Though I certainly never imagined having guns drawn at my wedding breakfast." That drew a reluctant smile from Zachary. "Welcome to life in the territories," he said dryly. A somewhat awkward silence fell. There was an elephant in the room that none of them had addressed: the sleeping arrangements for the newly married couple. Kate, practical as ever, tackled it head-on. "I've moved your things to Zach's room," she told Rebecca. "It seemed the most sensible arrangement, regardless of, well, the nature of your agreement." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That's very thoughtful, Kate." Zachary cleared his throat. "I can sleep in the bunkhouse if—" "Don't be ridiculous," Kate interrupted. "Your room is plenty large enough for two, and appearances matter. The hands respect you, Zach, but they're still men with eyes and ears. A husband who doesn't share his wife's bed would be remarked upon." Rebecca couldn't quite meet Zachary's eyes. The practical, safety-focused nature of their arrangement had somehow failed to prepare her for this most basic aspect of married life. "Kate's right," she said quietly. "Appearances do matter." Zachary nodded, his expression unreadable. "As you wish." Kate, sensing the tension, made a show of yawning. Well, it's been quite a day. I think I'll turn in early. She hugged Rebecca warmly. Welcome to the family, truly. Despite everything, I'm glad you're here. After she had gone, Rebecca and Zachary were left alone in the main room, the crackling of the fire the only sound. Outside, darkness had fallen, turning the windows into black mirrors that reflected their images back at them, a handsome man and a pretty woman in a blue dress, looking for all the world like a normal newlywed couple. Would you like some coffee? Zachary asked, breaking the silence. Or perhaps something stronger. We have a bottle of whiskey for special occasions. Coffee would be nice, Rebecca replied, grateful for the mundane suggestion. While Zachary busied himself at the stove, Rebecca moved to the fireplace, extending her hands toward the warmth. The events of the day had left her physically and emotionally drained, yet strangely alert. I want to apologize, Zachary said as he set the coffee pot to heat. For Haynes, for the confrontation. It wasn't how your wedding day should have been. Rebecca turned to look at him. You have nothing to apologize for. You've done nothing but help me since the moment we met. Still, he insisted, a woman should have better memories of her wedding day than armed standoffs and threats. She smiled slightly. I'll also remember the wildflowers and Kate's cake and the kindness of your neighbors. Those are good memories. Zachary brought 2 cups of coffee to the chairs by the fire, gesturing for Rebecca to sit. They settled into a companionable silence, sipping the hot, strong brew and watching the flames. May I ask you something personal? Rebecca said after a while. Zachary looked up, surprise evident in his expression. Of course. Have you never wanted to marry?
Before this, I mean, for
traditional reasons. He considered the question, taking his time before answering. There was someone once, before the war. We had an understanding, though nothing formal. What happened? Rebecca asked gently. She married someone else while I was away fighting, he said without bitterness. A merchant's son who stayed home. I couldn't blame her. The war dragged on, and letters were unreliable. For all she knew, I was dead. I'm sorry, Rebecca said sincerely. Zachary shrugged. It was a long time ago, and perhaps for the best. The war changed me. I'm not sure I would have been the man she remembered anyway. He looked at her curiously. And you? Was there someone in Boston? Rebecca shook her head. No one serious. My mother's illness required much of my time and attention. And after she died. She trailed off, not wanting to revisit those dark days. And now here we are, Zachary said softly. Married under the strangest of circumstances. Life takes unexpected turns, Rebecca agreed. If you had told me a week ago that I would be sitting here as your wife, I would have thought you mad. That drew a genuine laugh from him, a warm sound that Rebecca realized she had rarely heard. Madness or fate, he said. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Their eyes met across the space between their chairs, and that curious connection sparked again something more than the practical arrangement they had agreed to, yet undefined and fragile. Zachary set down his empty cup. It's getting late, he said, a hint of reluctance in his tone. We should probably turn in. Rebecca nodded, suddenly nervous again. Yes, of course. He led the way to their bedroom, carrying a lamp to light the path. The room was larger than the one Rebecca had occupied the previous nights, with a wide bed that dominated the space, a chest of drawers, a small desk and chair near the window, and a washstand in the corner. Kate moved your things, Zachary said, gesturing to the chest of drawers. Your bag should be there and anything else you need. Thank you, Rebecca said, hovering uncertainly near the door. Zachary set the lamp on the bedside table, then ran a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture of discomfort. I'll step out while you
prepare for bed, he said.
Take your time. When he had gone, Rebecca moved to the chest of drawers, finding her nightgown and robe neatly folded in the top drawer. She changed quickly, hanging the blue wedding dress carefully in the small wardrobe, where it looked strangely at home among Zachary's shirts and trousers. She had just finished brushing her hair when a soft knock came at the door. "Are you decent?" Zachary called. "Yes," she replied, tightening the sash of her robe around her waist. He entered, carrying a basin of water and a cloth. "Thought you might want to wash up," he said, setting it on the washstand. "I'll wait outside again." "No need," Rebecca said, finding unexpected courage. "This is your room, too." Zachary hesitated, then nodded. He turned his back politely while Rebecca washed her face and hands, then went behind the changing screen in the corner to prepare for bed himself. When he emerged, he was wearing a nightshirt and looking decidedly uncomfortable. "I usually sleep on the right side," he said, gesturing to the bed. "But I'm happy to take the left if you prefer." "The left is fine," Rebecca replied, trying to match his matter-of-fact tone despite the strangeness of the situation. They each took their respective sides of the bed, a careful distance maintained between them. Rebecca lay stiffly, acutely aware of Zachary's presence, of the rhythm of his breathing, of the unfamiliar scent of his soap and leather, and something distinctly male. "Zachary," she said softly into the darkness after he had extinguished the lamp. "Yes. Thank you. For everything." She felt rather than saw him turn toward her. "You're welcome, Rebecca. Sleep well." As she drifted toward sleep, Rebecca thought again of how drastically her life had changed in the span of a few days. From captivity to freedom, from desperate loneliness to being part of a family, however unconventional. Whatever came next, she was facing it not as Rebecca Winters, destitute and alone, but as Rebecca Thornton, wife and sister-in-law, with a home and people who cared what happened to her. It was, she decided as sleep claimed her, a very good trade indeed. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Rebecca integrated herself into the life of the ranch, helping Kate with household tasks, learning the patterns and routines that kept the operation running smoothly. She put her sewing skills to good use, mending clothes for the ranch hands, altering some of Kate's dresses to fit herself, and even beginning work on new curtains for the main room. Zachary kept his distance in some ways, careful not to push or presume. Their nights were spent in the same bed, but with that same respectful space between them. During the days, he was often busy with ranch work, riding out at dawn and returning tired but satisfied in the evenings. Yet there were moments of connection that seemed to go beyond their practical arrangement. The way Zachary's eyes sought hers across the dinner table, the brush of his hand against hers as he passed her coffee in the mornings, the genuine interest in his voice when he asked about her day. A week after the wedding, Rebecca was hanging laundry in the yard when Zachary rode in from checking the north pasture. He dismounted, leading his horse toward the barn, then paused when he saw her. "Need a hand?" he called, approaching. Rebecca smiled, surprised by the offer. "I'm nearly finished, but thank you." He nodded, watching as she pinned a shirt to the line. "You seem to be settling in well." "I am," she agreed.
"It's peaceful here."
"Despite everything." "Despite Haynes, you mean?" She nodded. There had been no further confrontations, but the threat lingered. Zachary had doubled the watch on the northern boundaries of the ranch and made sure Rebecca was never alone outside the immediate vicinity of the house. "Have you heard anything from town?" she asked. "Nothing specific," Zachary replied. "Roy spoke with a sheriff yesterday. He's aware of the situation but says there's little he can do unless Haynes actually breaks the law." Rebecca secured the last piece of laundry and picked up the empty basket. "And the lawyer in Helena? Any word from him?" Zachary shook his head. "Not yet. These things move slowly in the territories." He hesitated, then added, "Rebecca, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." Something in his tone made her heart quicken. "Yes. I was thinking about what you said about being a skilled seamstress." There's a need for that in Broken Ridge. Mrs. Peterson at the general store mentioned just last week that they have to send to Denver for any fine work. Rebecca looked at him curiously. Are you suggesting I set up as a seamstress in town? Eventually, perhaps. When the situation with Haynes is resolved. He shifted slightly, betraying uncharacteristic nervousness. Or you could work from here, take commissions. Kate could bring work back and forth when she goes to town. You've given this some thought, Rebecca observed. Zachary nodded. I want you to have options, Rebecca. This marriage may have been born of necessity, but I don't want you to feel trapped by it. The consideration behind his words touched her deeply. Thank you, she said softly. I would like that to have work of my own again. He smiled, a genuine expression that warmed his gray eyes. Good. I'll speak with Mrs. Peterson next time I'm in town. As he turned to lead his horse to the barn, Rebecca called after him. Zachary. He looked back. I don't feel trapped, she said simply. Not here. Not with you. Something flickered in his expression: surprise, pleasure, something more complex that she couldn't quite name. He nodded once, then continued toward the barn, but his steps seemed lighter somehow. That evening after dinner, as Kate read by the fire and Zachary worked on the ranch accounts at the table, Rebecca brought out a piece of paper and pencil. What are you working on? Kate asked, glancing up from her book. Designs, Rebecca replied. If I'm to set up as a seamstress, I should have some samples to show what I can do. Zachary looked up from his ledger, watching as Rebecca's skilled hand moved across the paper, sketching a lady's blouse with delicate embroidery at the collar. That's beautiful, he said when she had finished. Rebecca smiled, pleased by his approval. It's similar to designs my mother and I used to make for some of the ladies in Boston. Simple enough to be practical out here, but with touches that make it special. The women in town will love it, Kate predicted. They're starved for anything that reminds them of Eastern refinements. Even Mrs. Haynes orders her dresses from Denver catalogs. Rebecca looked up sharply. Mrs. Haynes? I didn't realize he was married. Kate nodded. Oh yes, for several years now. A timid little thing who rarely comes to town. People say he keeps her virtual prisoner at the ranch. Zachary frowned at his sister. That's gossip, Kate. We don't know the truth of their situation. Perhaps not, Kate conceded. But it's curious, isn't it, that a married man would be so eager to acquire a mail-order bride? Rebecca felt suddenly cold despite the warm evening. Unless he never intended me to be a bride at all, she said quietly. Just property. Zachary's expression darkened. All the more reason to be vigilant until we're certain he's given up his claim. The reminder of the danger still lurking sobered them all. Rebecca returned to her sketching, but her hand was less steady, her concentration broken by the thought of what might have awaited her at the Haynes ranch. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Rebecca found herself watching Zachary more closely than usual. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to physical labor, but there was a gentleness to his actions, as well the careful way he folded his clothes, the consideration with which he turned down her side of the bed before his own. Zachary, she said as they settled into their now familiar positions, may I ask you something? Of course, he replied, turning to face her in the dim light. Why did you stop that day on the trail? You could have ridden past, assumed Wilkes and I were simply travelers. It would have been easier. Zachary was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Something didn't seem right, he finally said. The way you were sitting, tense and watchful. The way Wilkes kept his hand near his rifle. He paused. And your eyes. When you looked at me, I saw fear but also a kind of desperate hope. I couldn't ride past that. The honesty of his answer moved her. I am glad you didn't, she said softly. So am I, he replied, his voice equally soft in the darkness. Their hands lay on the covers between them, not quite touching. Rebecca found herself acutely aware of the small distance, of how easy it would be to bridge it. But neither of them moved, each respecting the boundaries of their unusual arrangement. "Good night, Zachary," she said finally. "Good night, Rebecca," he replied, and something in the way he said her name made her heart beat faster, even as sleep began to claim her. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Rebecca was in the kitchen, helping Kate prepare bread dough, when the sound of a wagon approaching drew them to the window. "It's Sheriff Miller," Kate said, recognizing the tall figure driving the wagon. "And he's got someone with him." They watched as Zachary, who had been working near the barn, went to meet the sheriff. The two men spoke briefly, then Zachary glanced toward the house with an expression Rebecca couldn't interpret at a distance. "We should go out," Kate decided, wiping her hands on her apron. "Something's happening." As they stepped onto the porch, Rebecca got her first clear look at the sheriff's companion, a small, nervous-looking man with thinning hair and spectacles, clutching a leather satchel to his chest. "Mrs. Thornton," the sheriff called, tipping his hat to both women. "And Miss Kate. Good morning to you." "Sheriff," Kate replied. "What brings you out this way?" "Business concerning Mrs. Thornton here," he said, nodding toward Rebecca. "This is Mr. Franklin, attorney from Helena. Came in on yesterday's stage specifically to see you folks." Rebecca glanced at Zachary, who looked as surprised as she felt. "The lawyer you telegraphed?" she asked him quietly. He nodded, though I wasn't expecting him to come in person. The sheriff and Mr. Franklin approached the porch, the latter looking around nervously as if expecting trouble to materialize from the peaceful ranch yard. "Perhaps we could speak inside," he suggested, pushing his spectacles higher on his nose. "The matter is of some delicacy." Zachary nodded, gesturing toward the door. "Of course. Kate, could you put on some coffee?" Once they were settled around the table, Mr. Franklin opened his satchel and removed several documents. "Mr. Thornton," he began formally, "your telegram raised some very serious legal questions about the trafficking of women in the territory. I've been consulting with the territorial governor's office on the matter." Zachary leaned forward, his expression intent. And they are most concerned," Franklin continued. "It seems, Miss Winters, forgive me, Mrs. Thornton now is not the first woman to be brought west under false pretenses. There have been reports from Colorado, Wyoming, even California of similar schemes." "So you believe her story," the sheriff said, sounding slightly surprised.
"I do," Franklin replied firmly.
"The details match other cases we've investigated. These mail-order bride arrangements are legitimate when conducted honestly, but too often they're used as a cover for what amounts to human trafficking." Rebecca felt a wave of relief wash over her. To have her experience validated by an official, to know she wasn't alone in what had happened to her, was unexpectedly powerful. "What about the men responsible?" Zachary asked. "Blackwood in Chicago, Wilkes, this rancher Tanner in Colorado." Franklin adjusted his spectacles again. "We've sent telegrams to authorities in Chicago regarding this man Blackwood. As for Wilkes, the sheriff here has issued a warrant, though he's likely left the territory by now." "And Silas Tanner?" Rebecca asked quietly. "That's more complicated," Franklin admitted. "Your time with him was brief, and without witnesses to corroborate your account of being held against your will." "I understand," Rebecca said, though disappointment curled in her stomach. Tanner would likely never face justice for what he had done. "There is another matter," Franklin continued, extracting another document from his satchel. "Regarding Rancher Haynes." Everyone at the table tensed. "What about him?" Zachary asked, his voice carefully neutral. "We've received other complaints," Franklin said. "Nothing that could be proven in court, but enough to raise serious concerns. And now, with Mrs. Thornton's account of being sold to him sight unseen." He shook his head. "The governor is considering a more thorough investigation." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Haynes has friends in high places," he warned. "Powerful friends." "So does the governor," Franklin replied evenly. And human trafficking is a federal offense, Sheriff. No amount of local influence can shield someone from that. Rebecca glanced at Zachary, seeing the satisfaction in his expression. So what happens now? She asked. Now, Franklin said, I need to take your formal statement, Mrs. Thornton. Every detail you can recall of your experience, from the advertisement in Boston to your arrival here. It will be entered into the official record and may be used in future prosecutions. Rebecca nodded, though the prospect of reliving those dark days was daunting. Of course. I'd like to be present, Zachary said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Franklin hesitated. Some of the details may be personal in nature. Zachary is my husband, Rebecca said firmly. I have no secrets from him. It was a small lie. She had never shared the full extent of her time with Silas Tanner, but in this moment, she wanted Zachary's steady presence beside her. Very well, Franklin agreed. Sheriff, perhaps you and Miss Thornton might give us some privacy? Kate looked ready to protest, but the sheriff was already rising from his chair. Come on, Miss Kate, he said. I've been meaning to ask your advice about those apple trees I planted last spring. They're not doing so well. With obvious reluctance, Kate allowed herself to be led outside, leaving Rebecca, Zachary, and the lawyer alone at the table. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca recounted her story in detail, the advertisement that had seemed like salvation, the journey west, the shocking revelation in Chicago that she had been deceived, the nightmare of being sold to Silas Tanner, and finally the second sale that had brought her into Wilkes's custody and, ultimately, to her encounter with Zachary. Franklin took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. Zachary remained silent throughout, but Rebecca was acutely aware of his presence beside her, of the way his hand occasionally clenched into a fist when she described particularly difficult moments, of the steady, supportive glances he gave her when her voice faltered. She did not speak of the worst of her time with Tanner. Some things were too private, too painful to share even for the sake of justice. But she said enough that the lawyer's face grew grim with understanding. Thank you, Mrs. Thornton, Franklin said when she had finished. I know that was difficult. Your courage in coming forward may help prevent other women from suffering similar fates. Rebecca nodded, suddenly exhausted. I hope so. There's one more thing, Franklin added, extracting a final document from his satchel. In light of the circumstances, the Territorial Court is prepared to issue a formal declaration confirming the validity of your marriage to Mr. Thornton and explicitly invalidating any claims Rancher Haynes might make based on his arrangement with Wilkes. Zachary leaned forward. That would be most welcome, he said. It would put the matter beyond legal dispute. Franklin nodded.
Exactly.
I'll need signatures from both of you, and from the sheriff as witness. Then I'll take it back to Helena for the judge's seal. Rebecca signed where indicated, her hand steady despite her emotional exhaustion. Zachary did the same, his signature bold and clear beside hers. When the sheriff had been called back in to add his signature, Franklin gathered the documents and returned them to his satchel. I should be going, he said. I want to catch the afternoon stage back to Helena. I'll drive you to town, the sheriff offered. Zachary rose to see them out. Thank you for coming all this way, Mr. Franklin. It means a great deal to know the territorial authorities are taking this matter seriously. Franklin adjusted his spectacles one final time. Justice moves slowly in the territories, Mr. Thornton, but it does move. You've done a good thing, standing up for Mrs. Thornton as you have. After they had gone, Rebecca remained at the table, emotionally drained from reliving her ordeal. Zachary returned from seeing the visitors off and sat beside her, not speaking but offering his silent support. Are you all right? He asked finally, his voice gentle. Rebecca nodded. It was harder than I expected, speaking of it all again. But also freeing somehow. Zachary hesitated, then reached across the table to cover her hand with his own. You were very brave, he said simply. The warmth of his hand on hers was comforting, grounding. Rebecca turned her palm up, returning the pressure of his fingers with her own. "Having you there made it easier," she admitted. Something shifted in Zachary's expression, a softening, a warmth that had been growing between them these past days, but now seemed more pronounced. "I'm glad I could help," he said. "And I'm glad you're here, Rebecca. Not just because it was the right thing to do, but because—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Because," she prompted gently. "Because you've brought something to this house that was missing," he said finally. "A kind of warmth, a sense of possibility." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saying that, for everything." Their hands remained linked across the table, neither in a hurry to break the connection. In that moment, Rebecca realized that what had begun as an arrangement of convenience had become something more, perhaps not yet love in the traditional sense, but a genuine bond, a foundation upon which something real and lasting could be built. It was Kate who finally interrupted them, bustling in from outside with a basket of vegetables from the garden. "Well," she said, taking in their linked hands with obvious approval, "it seems I've been gone long enough." Zachary withdrew his hand, though with obvious reluctance. "The lawyer took Rebecca's statement," he told his sister. "And we have a formal declaration from the territorial court confirming our marriage and invalidating Haynes's claim." "That's wonderful news," Kate said sincerely. "Perhaps now we can put this unpleasantness behind us and focus on the future." She set the basket on the counter. "I'm thinking chicken stew for dinner. Rebecca, would you help me peel potatoes?" The normality of the request was exactly what Rebecca needed after the emotional intensity of the morning. She rose from the table, giving Zachary a small smile before joining Kate at the counter. As they worked side by side, Kate bumped her shoulder gently against Rebecca's. "So," she said in a low voice, "you and my brother seem to be finding your way." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We're becoming comfortable with each other." Kate smiled knowingly. "I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. It's more than comfort, Rebecca." Before Rebecca could respond, Zachary called from the door. "I'm heading out to check the south pasture. Don't wait dinner if I'm late." As he left, Rebecca found herself watching him go, noting the confident set of his shoulders, the way he moved with purpose and quiet strength. Kate's words echoed in her mind, more than comfort, and she realized with a small shock that her own feelings had evolved as well. What had begun as gratitude had deepened into respect, affection, and perhaps something more, something that made her heart beat faster when he entered a room, that sent warmth through her when their eyes met across the table. "You're blushing," Kate observed with a smile. Rebecca turned back to the potatoes. "It's warm in here," she said, not very convincingly. Kate laughed softly. "Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. Though it's hardly a secret to anyone with eyes." As they continued preparing dinner, Rebecca found herself wondering if Kate was right, if Zachary's feelings matched her own growing affection. And if they did, what it might mean for their future together. That night, as they prepared for bed in what had become their familiar routine, Rebecca felt a new awareness between them, a tension that was not unpleasant, but charged with possibility. Zachary seemed to feel it too. He moved more carefully around the room, his eyes meeting hers more frequently, lingering longer. As they settled into bed, the usual space between them seemed both necessary and impossible to maintain. Rebecca lay on her side, facing away from him as was her habit, but acutely conscious of his presence, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the sound of his breathing. "Rebecca," he said softly into the darkness. She turned toward him. Yes. In the dim light from the window, she could just make out his features, his gray eyes serious and intent. "Today with the lawyer."
"There were things you didn't say."
"About your time with Tanner." Rebecca tensed. "There were." "You don't have to tell me," he said quickly. I would never press you on something so painful.
I just want you to know
That nothing you could say would change how I see you. The kindness in his voice, the understanding, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Zachary hesitated, then reached across the space between them to gently brush a tear from her cheek. The touch was feather-light, reverent almost, but it sent a shiver through Rebecca that had nothing to do with sorrow. His hand lingered, cupping her cheek with a tenderness that took her breath away. Rebecca, he said again, her name a question and an answer all at once. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them, he had moved closer, the space between them narrowing to almost nothing. May I? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Zachary leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle, yet filled with unspoken emotion. Unlike the brief, ceremonial kiss at their wedding, this was a true joining, tentative at first, then deepening as Rebecca responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that for days, he admitted. Why didn't you? She asked softly. I didn't want you to feel obligated because of our arrangement. Rebecca smiled in the darkness. I don't feel obligated, Zachary. I feel. She searched for the right word.
cherished.
He drew back slightly to look at her, his expression a mixture of wonder and hope. You are, he said simply, more than I know how to express. This time it was Rebecca who initiated the kiss, finding courage in his honesty. His arms came around her, drawing her closer, and the last of the carefully maintained space between them disappeared. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. The marriage that had begun as an arrangement of convenience, a solution to a desperate situation, blossomed into something genuine and deep. Zachary's gentleness, his patient understanding as they navigated this new intimacy, confirmed everything Rebecca had come to believe about his character. In the weeks that followed, they settled into a new rhythm, still partners in the practical business of ranch life, but now truly husband and wife in every sense. Rebecca began taking sewing commissions from town, with Kate acting as her intermediary until the situation with Haynes was fully resolved. Her work quickly gained a reputation, and soon she had more orders than she could easily fill. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Zachary took her hand, his expression thoughtful. What are you thinking about? Rebecca asked, leaning comfortably against his shoulder. The future, he replied. Our future. She looked up at him curiously. What about it? When we married, he said slowly, I promised you that we could seek an annulment if you wished, when the danger had passed.
He paused.
It's been nearly 3 months. Franklin's letter last week said the investigation into Haynes is proceeding. There's been no further trouble. Rebecca felt a flicker of anxiety. Are you? Do you want that annulment? Zachary turned to her, his eyes serious. No, he said firmly. Not unless you do. I want you to stay, Rebecca, as my wife. Not because it's convenient or safe, but because I love you. The simple declaration, spoken without flourish but with absolute sincerity, filled Rebecca with a joy so intense it was almost painful. I love you too, she said softly. I think I have for longer than I realized. The smile that broke across Zachary's face was radiant. He gathered her into his arms, holding her close as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Then it settled, he said against her hair. No annulment. Just us, building a life together. Rebecca nodded against his chest, too full of emotion to speak. From the darkest moment of her life had come this unexpected gift, a man who saw her true worth, who had rescued her not just from immediate danger, but from a future without hope or love. I have something for you, Zachary said, reaching into his pocket. "I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He opened his hand to reveal a ring, a delicate band of gold set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Her engagement ring. When we married, there was only the wedding band, but I always intended." He trailed off, looking suddenly uncertain. "If you'd rather have something new, it's beautiful," Rebecca interrupted, genuinely moved. "I would be honored to wear your mother's ring." With a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, Zachary slipped the ring onto her finger, where it nestled perfectly alongside the simple wedding band. "There," he said softly. "Now it's official. Not just a marriage of convenience, but a true partnership." Rebecca looked down at the rings on her finger, symbols of a journey she could never have imagined when she boarded that train in Boston, desperate and alone. "From mail-order bride to beloved wife," she said with a small smile. "Not the path I expected, but I wouldn't change it." Zachary's arms tightened around her. "Nor would I," he said. "Not a single step." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, their future stretching before them, a future built not on deception or coercion, but on choice, respect, and love freely given and joyfully received. 5 years later, Rebecca stood on that same porch, watching as Zachary taught their 3-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. Kate stood beside her, holding Rebecca's infant daughter, Elizabeth, who gurgled happily in her aunt's arms. "He's a natural horseman, like his father," Kate observed as little James bounced in the saddle, his face alight with excitement. "And just as stubborn," Rebecca agreed with a fond smile. "He insisted on the pony this morning, even though Zachary said he should wait until next year." "Thornton men," Kate said with a laugh. "Once they set their minds on something, they don't give up," Rebecca finished. Thank goodness for that. The ranch had prospered in the years since their marriage. Zachary's careful management and forward-thinking investments had expanded their holdings, while Rebecca's sewing business had grown into a small but thriving enterprise. She now employed 2 young women from town to help with the simpler work, while she handled the design and finer details herself. Rancher Haynes had eventually faced justice, though not for his attempts to purchase Rebecca. The territorial investigation had uncovered evidence of rustling and intimidation, leading to his arrest and conviction. His ranch had been sold to pay his debts, his wife returning east to live with relatives. The dark chapter that had brought Rebecca west was closed, leaving only the life she and Zachary had built together, a life richer and more fulfilling than she could have imagined in those desperate days after her mother's death. "Mama, look," James called, waving wildly as Zachary led the pony in a circle.
"I'm riding."
"I see you, sweetheart," Rebecca called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Zachary looked up at her, his face relaxed and happy in a way it rarely had been when they first met. The years had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of gray at his temples, but to Rebecca, he was more handsome than ever, his face now familiar and beloved, the map of their shared life together. As if reading her thoughts, he smiled at her, that special smile that was hers alone. Even after 5 years of marriage, it still had the power to quicken her heart. "I think that's enough for today, Cowboy," he told James, lifting the protesting boy from the saddle. "Your mother and sister are waiting for us." He swung James onto his shoulders and walked toward the porch, his long strides eating up the distance. When he reached them, he set James down and took Elizabeth from Kate's arms, pressing a gentle kiss to his daughter's downy head. "How are my girls?" he asked, his free arms slipping around Rebecca's waist. "We're perfect," Rebecca replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just perfect." And they were. The mail-order bride who had been bought and sold like property had found her true value in the arms of a man who saw her worth from the beginning, not as a possession to be owned, but as a partner to be cherished, a woman to be loved. As the family moved inside together, Rebecca glanced back at the Montana landscape stretching around them, the rolling hills, the distant mountains, the vast sky that had once seemed so alien and now felt like home. Her journey west had begun in deception and fear, but it had led her to love, to family, to a life built on trust and mutual respect. It was, she thought as she closed the door behind them, the greatest journey of all.